So every day, older adults who have been long-term homeowners are transitioning into alternative housing options or situations, whether it's independent living, maybe a 55 and older community, all different types of situations. And sometimes those moves, those transitions go well, and other times they don't go so well. So today I'm here with Carrie Blubaugh, my friend, and she has been working in the industry for around 30 years, and she's seen about everything. And so I'm very, very excited that you're here and to share your knowledge with us.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
You bet. Tell us just a little bit about your history.
Yeah. So I've been a physical therapist for 31 years and worked with a wide range of, age populations in those 3 decades. My last 24 years has specifically been in working with older adults. So in long-term care situations like nursing homes, but also assisted living communities, independent living communities, memory care. So I've definitely seen a lot of people transition throughout different levels of care and transition different housing options, some by their choice, some not by their choice. Right. And have seen, like you said, some go amazingly well and some just really with a lot of difficulty, sadness, bitterness, and grief.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I want you to share a couple stories, so maybe, one on both sides of the
of
the line. And I also want you to know that toward the end of the video that ways that you can make this a more positive experience. So let's just start with maybe an example of something that maybe it didn't go so well for them.
Didn't go so well. So I'm just going to kind of give you the extremes, knowing that there's everything in between there. I had a resident that I worked with, we'll say her name's Mary, and she was living a great, socially active, very empowered, fun life out of state, living on her own independently, had a significant health situation that changed all of that and necessitated that she had to be moved into rehab and then moved to assisted living.
In a different city, right?
In a different city, in a different state.
It's more challenging sometimes.
Very much so. So her son moved her to be closer to her, up here in Kansas City. And although that was probably the right move for a lot of reasons, to be close to family and logistically, there was a lot of loss in moving from her home, leaving her friends that she had there in her community. Because it was such a sudden situation, and because of her health issues and mobility issues, she wasn't able to be involved in the decision-making process. She couldn't tour any facilities. Her son had to find everything for her. There was no involvement. She had no agency in that process. And that was really difficult for her. And then so when she was in a really nice apartment, she had everything she needed.
Here in Kansas City.
When she moved to the assisted living. But for her next several years, she just never really got over how poorly in her mind that transition went. And it really clouded her entire experience.
Because she really had no control.
She had no...
didn't have, like you said, didn't have a say.
Yeah, she didn't have a say, she didn't have control. She didn't feel like she had any control. And so when we would try to talk to her about making changes in her apartment that would help her mobility-wise, help her quality of life, she would say, I'm stubborn, I don't like to change, I don't want to change. And she really doubled down on having control over the small things that she had, even though suggestions that were being made would have made life better and easier for her. And really the take-home message with this story for her is how it impacted. She had a great family. She really loved her family, but her son, who had to make these hard decisions and help her coordinate all of the logistics of her life, their relationship was forever impacted and not the same.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really sad. That's the biggest loss there, that there wasn't a way to reconcile all of that and have it be a more successful transition for everybody.
Sure. And he was, I'm sure, doing what he thought was best.
Absolutely.
We're all doing our best.
Everybody's doing their best.
Yeah.
But
there are tools maybe he could have used to maybe make that.
And she could have used.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. For both of them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not, because this isn't a blame situation, right? I mean, everyone's just doing their best. And for adult children, with aging parents, like, we all come into this with very little knowledge or expertise, and you do the best.
You've never done it before.
You've never done it, and you do the
first.
best you can, and it's hard for everybody. Yeah.
And so that was probably an extreme situation
Right.
where things didn't go well. It never really totally rectified itself, right? It just lasted entire stay.
She did. She was just really would always go back to, I'm not happy here. This wasn't, I'm not. I wish I wasn't here, and nothing about this is good. Yeah.
So,
but
there are positive.
There are very positive experiences. Yeah. So we have another woman who I've worked with. We'll call her Jane, and she's another very active, vibrant person, socially, physically. And she was a caregiver for her husband. Her husband was having more needs. And so they made a decision as a family to move into assisted living, really for the husband. And she still provided care for her husband, but she herself was very independent, could do everything. But she was involved in that decision-making process. She toured facilities. The husband toured facilities with her. And they made the decision as a family. And they had a family farm. And there was decisions and lots of conversations about who would get the family farm. Grandson purchased it from her, so she's still able to go back to this farm. And he's taking his stewardship of their legacy. And granted, that's a really extreme positive example. Most of us don't get to go back to the home that we leave, or our farm, or our land that we leave. So there's a lot of things there that made it really positive. But also the things that made it positive that she did, she really embraced the senior living community that she and her husband were in. And even after he passed, she would absolutely be able to move back into the community at large if she wanted to, in a small house. But she had really immersed herself in the assisted living community there. And she made friends, and she made relationships, and she got involved in activities, and she got involved in volunteering at that community. And she really sees it as her home. Right. And she's embraced it as such. And she has decided to stay there for the unforeseeable future, knowing that she may have needs in the future that they could help her with. Right. And then she's already there in place. Yeah. And no one has to be burdened with, what do we do now? Because this health crisis has occurred. Right. And she's just a joyful, happy person because she's chosen that I chose to be here, and I'm happy with this situation.
Yeah. And that makes me think that a lot of times it's not always the exact circumstances, but how we look at that, or how we decide to think about our situation, whether it's when you're an older adult and you're moving into a new housing situation, or for any of us, right, in life. A lot of times it's not about circumstances. So you probably see in the same circumstances or similar, people have different feelings about it.
Right. You and I talk about this a lot in our friendship, and absolutely, it's like people's story, right? What their experience is, what their story is about their circumstances or a situation is really everything. And research on happiness is fascinating because it talks about happiness is really only dependent 10% on circumstance. And 90% are all internal type factors that can be eked out. But that's pretty powerful. Yeah. And I have definitely seen that over the years, dealing with people with major health crisis, injury, illnesses, life-changing, debilitating illnesses, injuries. And whether or not those things happen doesn't determine if you're happy or not. Yeah. But truly, your story about it, and how you experience it, and how you choose to let that define or identify the rest of your life. So with housing, it's very impactful, because how we see anything is how we experience anything. Like our story about it is how we experience it, and that impacts all dimensions of ourselves: physical, mental, emotional, spiritually. Mm-hmm. And it impacts ourselves, but it also impacts the people around us, right? It has a ripple effect to all of our people around us, and it has a ripple effect into the future. I think the interesting thing is, we were sitting here talking about Mary and Jane. transitions, I think we think about, oh, you make a choice, you make the move, you pack the boxes, you move, you get unpacked, and you get settled, and the transition's over. And while that's true for the physical aspect of it, what has really struck me in our conversation is how successful or not successful these transitions are far-reaching. It can color the rest of your situation in wherever you land.
Right.
And it definitely did for both of these people. Mm-hmm. I knew Mary for a handful of years, and she was really just never reconciled that loss and bitterness and grief. And it colored her whole experience there. And Jane has continued to flourish and just be grateful and happy and living her best life. And I think we'll continue to, regardless what comes her way.
Right. And so, I mean, it is important. So that's like it's an important aspect of it that, you know, we always are talking about or believing in that, not just when you're making these kind of transactions, but in life as well overall.
Right.
But there are some practical things in addition to kind of our mental attitude about a move or a transition or a change in our life. There are also some kind of practical things that the people that are moving can do, as well as if there's any maybe older or adult children that are involved.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to make this whole process much more successful. And a buzzword now that you'll hear a lot, and certainly a word I use a lot, is agency, which is having part of the decision-making process, knowing that your voice matters, knowing that your opinion matters.
I like to say control.
That's control. Yes, that you have some
control.
You have some control over this process. You have agency in this. And I think for older adults, it often feels like they don't have control of this process.
Right.
And the reality is sometimes things happen quickly and there is very little control they have. Mary's a great example of that. But what can also be true is we can do things to help give them a little bit more feeling of control and agency. So while she could not physically go to her different assisted livings in Kansas while she was living in Arkansas, I mean, ideally we go out and we do the tours of the maintenance-free living or senior communities or homes tours. We do that on our own. But when we can't do that, you can certainly FaceTime the whole process, or you could take pictures, or you can show snippets of videos to really let them see where they're going to go, or say, this is place A, B, and C. Which one do you like better? Anything you like or don't like about that? So to whatever extent that we can include older adults into this process is absolutely vital, I think. That's key number one. And I know that this is not really, I think, what we're talking about in this video, but then deciding what to do with all of your stuff. You know, having agency and control over that makes a big difference.
And one thing I do talk about sometimes is how important it is to plan ahead of time, even before you think. Maybe it's 5 years or 10 years down the road, but you can plan a little bit ahead of time, and that really, I think, helps people. I have a client right now, and she just moved into an independent living situation, but her and her husband had gone out over 5 years ago. They toured some different places. They decided that they were going to buy something that they could age in place in, and now he's passed, and so she's able then to move into the community that they liked, that they wanted to move into, and they had looked at over 5 years ago. Doesn't mean you're going to move in ever, but it could be several years down the road. But that planning and just kind of having an idea of what's out there, I think, is super important.
That's huge, and that is to me the perfect case scenario. Like what, and how comforting I would hope for her that she can be like her husband. Like that relationship with people who died doesn't really end, and that's a perfect example of, as she moves into this new space, like he helped me find this, like we found this together. This was what we chose together, and I would hope and think that there's just a great amount of comfort and security in feeling like you're making the right choice. And I think that's really important, because that was the next thing I was going to talk about, is just having those sometimes hard, but having those conversations with your partner, your spouse, your adult children, your friends. Like if you don't have a spouse, or if you don't have a spouse who's wanting to go look at places with you, like get together with your girlfriends. I know I'm in my 50s, and I know some women in their 50s have been like, let's go get our mammograms together and our shingle shots. Like, we're going to do all of this, right? Let's knock it out.
Our village.
And the same thing as we get a little older. Like, let's just have a day where we treat ourselves to a nice lunch. We go tour some places, talk about things we like and don't like, so that we can tuck it away for our insurance policy, and have an idea of places that we would like to go or not like to go, or situations that resonated with us or absolutely did not work for us, and why. And then have those conversations ahead of time. I think is huge. Feels very daunting, but when you do it, unbelievably empowering.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. The agency there.
The agency again.
So we've talked about kind of some planning situations, things that you do beforehand to make it good.
Yeah.
But there are situations like Mary where, okay, we're here. Maybe we didn't plan as well as we should. We didn't know what was going to happen. Are there things we could do to make it more comfortable or better for Mary once she's moved in, and instead of having that continue on for the rest of her time there?
I totally, yes, I think there are. I think there's always ways to help heal situations and transform situations that maybe didn't go well as we lived through them in real time. I'm a big believer, proponent in ceremony and ritual. I think ceremonies are like symbolic representations, and they put form to the formless. So for her, there was just a lot of this unprocessed grief. Right? There's this underlying bitterness and anger and sadness and resentment and just deep sadness and grief. And so to back up a bit, I think, in a perfect world, in a perfect situation, being able to say goodbye to our home in really positive ways, whether it's just something very informal that you actually
your
physically
long-term home, or the home
your long-term home that you've been in for decades, or you had your family, whatever your stories are in that home. I think it's really important to be able to say goodbye to that, whether it's very informally, you get to walk through and everyone just kind of says a good memory, you do the last walkthrough, you say a prayer, you say a blessing. And again, some people can't do that, but even if you can get them there somehow, or physically, again, let's FaceTime. Let's do a video walkthrough if the person can't actually get back to that home. And maybe from wherever they are, they get to say a prayer. They all get to say their memories. You just get to say a well wish for the people moving into your home, hoping that they have happy memories there as well.
In knowing that it can bring up emotions, right? Like,
and hoping that it brings up emotion.
Right? You want that.
I want that, because I think that's how you process it. But absolutely. And I think that's why a lot of people want to shy away from this, because we don't want to get emotional. We're in this logistical mode. We just got to do it. We got to get it through. But we're not honoring the grief and the loss that goes along with this process. And when I talk about grief, I don't mean that it's a bad process. Like, you can be saying goodbye to something
and be sad
for saying goodbye to this, and saying hello to this, and knowing it's a good, better choice for you. Like, it's not mutually exclusive. And I think sometimes we're so
just
quick,
not all good with that, right?
We're not always all good with all the
emotion.
Different layers, and we just want to move. We literally want to move people to the moving. Like, let's just get on to the next step, instead of really honoring there are a lot of layers of emotion here. And if we honor them and we're honest about them and can speak to them and then move into this next phase, I think we can do it with a lot more grace. You can even get into more formal, more layered, deeper rituals. In Mary's case, she missed out on that. But that doesn't mean that then there aren't still things you can do to say goodbye to that house. So if the house is already gone, then maybe do we write a goodbye letter to that house? Do we hopefully have pictures of the house that we can maybe put together in a book for her? One person, one family I saw, they did a great job. They went through, took pictures of the entire home, inside and out, all of the beautiful artwork, all of their knickknacks that they maybe weren't taking, the furniture, just the wallpaper, all the little things.
Because you have to give away so many things, right?
Yes.
So you have that whole loss.
You have
but
that
if you
loss
can have
too.
at least pictures to kind of go back and jog your memories and feel good about that. That's
so
a great
she had this incredible Shutterfly book that was just, and again, all the little things, like, you know, the little bathroom that we never redid for 30 years that had that weird wallpaper, but like, that's our bathroom. That's the bathroom your daughter got ready to go to prom in. Like all of those things that are meaningful to us and putting it together in one place. I think what's really important, and again, I know I keep talking about it, but is really addressing the grief and the loss head on. And if it's not comfortable for family members to address that with their loved ones and their older adults and their parents, grandparents, and often it's not, then I think you need to find somebody, a clergy person, a counselor, a social worker, a spiritual coach, whatever it is, that you can just actively be heard. Like your story needs to be heard. Mary's story of her loss and her grief and what she left in Arkansas really needed to be heard and honored without judgment, without anything else. And I think had that maybe happened earlier, with a very intention of healing that process through her storytelling of her experience, I think can be significant. And there's some great journaling tools that also like take you through doing life transitions successfully that help you kind of honor the positive things, talk about your hopes and dreams and disappointments, forgiving and releasing what you need to release.
And this is something that you do for people, right? You help them work through this. If maybe work through it with the family, or work through that grief, and to use all these different tools that are important, or that you know, find out what it's going to take to let some of that go.
I do. I mean, as a physical therapist, I have really the luxury and the great privilege of meeting people and being with people at some of their most raw and challenging and life-changing periods of their life. And I will often, you know, ask them and have conversations as we're doing our therapy, because it does impact you physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Like it's all, our body is it's all connected.
That holistic approach.
The holistic approach.
It's all connected.
So I definitely kind of weave it in to my physical therapy practice. And I've also been certified as a spiritual coach, counselor. And I really have a passion to work with older adults, because I think there's a lot of transition processes and journeys at this stage in life that we're not talking about, that we're not honoring. We're not honoring the grief and loss part of it. And I'm not saying we don't need to stay in the grief and loss part, but we've got to honor it, so then we can turn and move into the gratitude part, which we haven't talked about yet, but like to really move fully forward. So,
and I think as a culture, we haven't really learned how to do this very well. And as people are living longer and we're having to make changes later in life instead of aging in place less, but we need to, as a culture, learn how to do this. And we're just kind of in that process of really doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, like, change is inevitable. We all know this. We all know this from when we're young, but yet we still, I feel like as we go through life, we still butt up against it and fight it and resist it. And I think the people who can really embrace change gracefully, then allow to age gracefully, have the component of gratitude. So that's the other thing, and I do this with my patients a lot, is asking people just to look for gratitude every day in their life, and you know, noticing and noting 2, 3, 5 things every day that you're grateful for. But especially in the worst of the most challenging of situations.
And there's so much research out there about
it's
how
unbelievable.
I mean, you could read forever about how important having gratitude is.
Yes,
even if you don't fully mean it right in the moment.
Right. No, and it's not toxic positivity, and we won't get into that. It's not toxic positivity, but it's truly just saying, what is going right in my life today? What am I grateful for? I had somebody be nice to me. I got the dessert last night. I got a phone call from somebody. there was a cardinal outside my window for 10 minutes and I just enjoyed watching them. Like, it seems very silly, but those are the things that bring us joy. The beauty in life brings us gratitude. And if we train ourselves to look for those things, it literally changes your neural pathways in your brain.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a whole nother conversation that I've given talks on health benefits of gratitude, but
we get more of what we focus on, right? So
yes.
If you're focusing on the beauty of a cardinal, you're going to start noticing other beautiful things or little snippets.
Right. And the bigger beautiful things in life.
Sure.
Yes. So I think that's another thing about success, that for people that have the healthy, empowered, successful transitions are in some ways, whether they're formally or informally, they're finding the gratitude and the beauty in difficult situations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming and being here. And
thank you. I love this conversation.
Yes.
This is the stuff
we could talk for a long time about this, can we?
We could. I would love to.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and I love your
welcome.
perspective, and you have so much experience in this, and I know without a doubt that you are making an impact and have made an impact on those people that you see. What, even though you're doing their physical therapy, it's so much more than that. So I appreciate you.
Thanks for including me and asking me to do this. I love it.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you so much. If you are looking for some other videos that give us some more information about how to plan for these types of moves, go ahead and check those out.